properly. All right. Okay. It is so good to have you all here with us. My name is Tim Wright, as Chuka said, and I have been a Lutheran pastor in Arizona for 36 years. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and came down here. I've done my entire ministry here. I started out at a large church in Phoenix, and then 15 years ago, that church sent me out with a group of people to start a new church, which is now called Community of Grace Lutheran Church. So I've been there 15 years. My wife and I just celebrated our 41st wedding anniversary. We have 2 kids. They're both married. And between them, we have 5 grandchildren. So I have raised a boy. I have raised a girl. And I have 2 grandsons and 3 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. So I am an advocate for boys and for girls. But my interest in boys started about 15 years ago. And I connected with my friend, Dr. Michael Gurian, who does a lot of work with boys. And the reason for the interest in boys isn't because I don't care about girls, but because in the United States and in other parts of the world, the needs of boys are not talked about nor advocated for as often as we do for our girls. And so our boys are hurting and falling behind in many ways. So what I want to do for just a little bit of time, and Jeff, can you sort of time me, and at about 30 minutes, just start waving your hands and let me know it's time for me to wrap it up. And I want to just walk through some general things about boys, just to get us started. And I want you to know that I'm going to be sending Chuka my notes, and he will send them off to you. He's going to send you a copy of my book. So don't feel like you have to take a lot of notes right now or concentrate on that. Just sort of take in the information. If there's something you want to write down, please feel free to do that. But I will send you my notes as we go along. So let me start with a story. And if it's all right, I'm going to pick on the Lutherans and the Catholics in this story a little bit. And this is a story about a boy. He's about 8 years old. And he lives out in the country. And so he goes to this little church out in the country, and he feels like he's big enough now to walk home by himself. So he asks mom and dad if he can walk home, and they say sure. They trust him. So he's walking home down one of the dirt roads to get to his house. And as he's walking along the dirt road, he notices coming toward him a girl about the same age as he is. And it so happens that when they meet, they both turn and go the same direction. So since they're walking together, the boy feels like he might as well start up a conversation with her. And he says, hi. And she says, hi back. And he said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm walking home from church. What are you doing? He said, I'm walking home from church. He said, what church do you go to? She said, I go to the Catholic church. And she said, what church do you go to? He said, I go to the Lutheran church. So they're walking down the road, and suddenly they hit this great, big, huge mud puddle. It had rained the night before, and this was huge, and there was no way around it. They'd have to walk through it, and they were both afraid. The little girl said, man, if I walk through that mud and get my clothes dirty, my mom's not going to be real happy with me. And the boy said the same thing. He said, if I get my Sunday clothes dirty, my mom will really be upset. So the little girl said, I've got an idea. And so she stripped off all of her clothes and she put them on top of her head like this. And the little boy did the same thing, and they walked across that mud puddle naked. And as they're standing on the other side drying off, the boy looks her up and down one time, and he said, my goodness, I didn't realize there was such a difference between Lutherans and Catholics. Good. I see Chuka got it. That's good. Thank you. All right. So here's the point. We know that there are a lot of things that are similar between boys and girls, biologically and in the brain. But we also know that there are significant differences between boys and girls, biologically and in the brain. This doesn't make one better than the other. They are equal. They're just different. We know, for example, that there are over 150 differences between a boy brain and a girl brain, and those are significant. We're going to talk about some of them today. And so what I want to focus on a little bit is, what is it that makes boys unique? Why are they worth loving? How are they created in the image of God? And then a few things that we can begin to do to call out goodness out of our boys, to help our boys become good men. And I'll get through as much of my stuff as I can before our Q&A, because we do want to get to your questions. But again, I will be sending you my notes, and I'll be sending a copy of my book. So anything I'm not able to cover in our time together, you'll get. All right. So let me start with this. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and in the wintertime, we'd get a lot of snow. White stuff, you know what I'm talking about? We don't get that here in Phoenix. We just get a lot of heat. And one year, we had tons and tons of snow. And it was so high in front of our house that we could climb the snowbanks and get onto the roof of our house. And so what we did was, we had these little plastic sleds. They would roll up. And so we'd stick one under our arm, and we'd climb up onto the roof. And then we'd get at the top of the roof, get on the sled, and we would slide down off the roof into the snowbank below. Now, as I think about it today, it's crazy, in part because there was a tree branch hanging over the spot where we were lying down or sliding down. And if we didn't put our heads back, we would have knocked ourselves crazy. It was just nuts. I'd never let my kids do that. But boys do those kinds of things all the time. Boys are risk takers. And the question is, why do boys do that? Oh, okay, Jeff, I'm having a problem here moving my slides. So I'm going to stop my share for just a moment. Sorry about that. Let's see if this will move it. There it goes. Okay, yep, I got it. Okay, there we go. So I want to use a word that is both biologically true about boys, and it's also a great metaphor for why boys are the way they are. And that's the word testosterone. Testosterone is a chemical in our bodies. And boys are made up of a whole lot more testosterone, 7 to 20 times more testosterone than our girls. And we're going to find out in a moment just how important this particular chemical is in our bodies, and how it is that it shapes boys into what they are. Now, I do want to say that boys are made up of more than testosterone, just as girls are made up of more than just estrogen and oxytocin, all right? But for boys, testosterone is a defining hormone. It's what shapes us. It shapes our behavior. And again, it serves as a great metaphor for who boys are and how they respond to life. One of the things that I think is interesting is that testosterone is the defining agent of whether a fetus will be male or female. So when we're in the womb, we all sort of start out female, but then that burst of testosterone onto the fetus from the mother turns that female fetus into male. And so it's testosterone that makes males male. Now, females have testosterone, but not to the extent that boys do. Testosterone is an aggression and physical risk-taking hormone. We know that boys, far more than girls, take risks. Now, again, girls take risks, but not to the extent that boys do. And part of that is because of testosterone. It is a fight, flight, or freeze chemical in our bodies. And so we tend to be more aggressive, and we tend to take more risks. Now, let me say a word about aggression here. Aggression is not violence, all right? Violence is a problem, and aggression can become violence, but aggression is not violence. Aggression is just a way of relating to the world. It's an energy that we have to the world. It's wanting to be all in, all right? Aggression is not violence. It is a good quality, and it is aggression that, when it's used correctly, helps boys build a better world. Testosterone expresses itself in the need to move and do things. If you've ever taught boys, you'll know this. They can sit for 5 or 6 minutes before they have to start fiddling around with something, all right? Because they've got this testosterone. Testosterone is a movement chemical. So they can't sit still. So if you've ever taught boys, you'll notice about 5 or 7 minutes in, they start tapping their fingers on the desk, or they just start moving around, or they're hitting their buddies, or whatever it might be. And they just have this need to move. And one of the reasons why our boys struggle in our education systems, and I'll speak just for the United States because I don't know your education systems, our boys sit far too long and they're not getting exercise. We have taken away recess. Our boys are sitting too long, and when boys sit too long, their brains turn off. And when they start to fidget and do these things, it's because they're trying to turn their brains on again. So when you're teaching boys and you notice boys start to get squirmy, or they're tapping their hands or tapping their feet, that's a sign that the boys are trying to wake their brains up again. And that's a good sign. All right. And what it also says to us when we're teaching them or working with them is we got to get those boys to stand up and stretch a little bit. Okay. Testosterone, because of testosterone, on average, and this has been studied extensively, on average, boys will turn toys into guns and swords more often than girls. So there have been many studies on this. And if you give girls dolls and trucks, they will create relational scenarios where even the trucks start taking on human qualities. You give a boy a doll, and more often than not, he's going to tear the head off and the arms off, and he's going to either make a weapon of it or try to figure out how to put it back together again, because that's the way his brain is wired, okay, to put things together. And it's a great gift that boys have. They tend to hit more. All right, so you see boys doing that all the time, and that hitting oftentimes is a sign of affection. All right, this is friendship nurturance. The way that boys build relationships is through physical, wrestling, hitting each other, tearing each other down verbally. Man, that's an ugly shirt. Oh, he loves me. He just said my shirt was ugly. All right, so boys relate differently than girls do. They will tend to one-up more. If you've ever been in a room of men, and they start a story about a trip, oh, they got to top it with their story, and that's got to be topped by another story. The proverbial one here in the United States is, well, the fish I caught was this big, and each fish story, it gets bigger and bigger. They will tend to be in tune less to the pain of others. Oxytocin and estrogen in girls is a bonding chemical. And so they are far more aware of the nuances of human pain and being able to read facial expressions. Boys don't have a lot of that, and so they're not as in tune to the pain of others. They are generally more competitive. And again, we're speaking in big generalities. They're generally more competitive, and they seek rough and tumble play. Testosterone-driven boys will seek independence earlier than girls, generally speaking again. But boys want to know as they seek their independence that mom and dad love them, or that mom, dad has their back. As he moves into puberty, so, 12, 13, 14, 15, he's going to have 5 to 7 surges of testosterone in his body each day. So it's like a volcano going off in his body 5 to 7 times a day. And in junior high, we're expecting him to sit quietly. And he just can't do it. His body's not wired to do that. He'll be quicker to act physically to external stimulation. So if a boy is stressed, let me say this, if a girl is stressed, she will tend to use words. If a boy is stressed, he will tend to lash out or throw a ball or go for a run or go for a walk. He will express his stress through physical activity. So testosterone will move him to problem solving. This is the sort of the classic thing in male-female relationships. The female wants to talk and to express what she's feeling, and the man is listening, but he's not as good with words, as we'll see in a moment. And while he's listening, he's trying to fix the problem. She doesn't want him to fix the problem. She wants him to listen. He wants to fix the problem. And so it's always this dance between listening and fixing the problem. And then, as I mentioned, he will look for activities that will help release his testosterone. And so it's a powerful, it creates powerful emotions in boys. It's a powerful hormone. When boys use it well, they can build a great world. If it's not managed, it can get away from them. And so it's really important for boys to have strong men and women around them to work with them. A few other quick hits on boys. Boys find it harder to put feelings into words. Because of the way a boy's brain is wired, he doesn't have connection between both sides of the brain like a girl does. So he thinks with two different sides of the brain. A girl connects words and emotions. A boy doesn't. So if you were to ask a boy, how are you feeling? It may take him anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 days to come up with an answer, because he's got to search for the word. And that's why a lot of times you say, how you doing? He's, yeah, fine, good. And behind that good could be all kinds of emotion going on. Boys tend to mature more slowly than girls do. They tend to be about a year or two behind girls until about junior high or high school. So that would be around 12 to 14 to 15 is when boys start catching up. Boys are more visual or picture oriented, so they learn far better with pictures, not just words. And they tend to view sex much differently than do girls, because boys' bodies respond to sex where girls' minds tend to respond to sex. And so a boy can have a physical reaction to a girl without even thinking about it. It just, he sees it and boom, he's got a physical reaction. And that's because he's so visual and because of testosterone. So with that sort of overview, let me just share some things that we can begin to do to help shape our boys. And I'm going to show you a video
He's
here.
Wearing the number 22, guys. It is Jack Hoffman.
Let me just set this up. This is American football. This is a young boy who has been diagnosed with cancer. And he has been asked, or one of his dreams is to play with the Nebraska Cornhuskers, which is a college football team here in the Midwest. And this wish is granted. What I want you to watch for is how these men mentor this boy, all the different things they do to mentor this boy. And I'll give you a few insights as we move out of this, but just thought you'd watch it. If you've never seen American football before, it's probably different than some of what you watch, but here we go.
Of Team Jack coming out on the field right now, this fourth down and short. For the red team, Jack Hoffman has been adopted really by this football team. A young man who has battled brain cancer is on the field right now for the Huskers.
One more snap for Taylor Martinez, too, who will hand it off to Jack.
So Taylor gets the shotgun set, gives it to Jack. Here he goes. He's got blockers out in front.
There he goes.
He's running the midfield. Listen to this crowd. As Jack Hoffman, the young man that, as I mentioned, has really been adopted by this football team, just scored a touchdown.
Oh, wow. What a moment.
And both benches empty.
That was a moment right there. Wow, goosebumps.
All right, so let me tell you some of the things I see in that, which is really important for us as we think about shaping boys into men. You'll notice that he wasn't sure where to go when he first started. So they had to put him in position, and he started to run the wrong way, and they showed him the way to run, the right way to run. And then they surrounded him. They protected him for a while as he was running that ball to protect him from the defenders that were coming toward him. And then once he sort of knew what it is to be a man, metaphorically speaking, they let him go. And they still kind of guided him. They were still on the sides to protect him, but they let him go. And when he got into the end zone, they celebrated the fact that he had scored that touchdown, or they celebrated his manhood. And the other thing to notice is that he wore the cloak of manhood. He wore the same outfit that the other men were wearing. And they guided him into the process through directing him, through protecting him, and through letting him go, and then celebrating his manhood. So With that sort of in mind, let me tell just a few stories here. One of them has to do with the importance of dads. And before I talk about the importance of dads, let me just tell a quick story. Some of you maybe heard this, but back in the 1990s, this was a report done on our one of our national news broadcasts in the 1990s. There was a reserve in South Africa that had a problem with elephants. There were too many of them. And so their solution was to move out the adult population to another reserve and to let the youngsters sort of repopulate. But there was an unintended consequence. They discovered that there were white rhinos being killed. And they weren't sure who the culprits were because the horns weren't being taken. And as you remember back in those days, that was happening. And so they did a stakeout and they discovered what was happening was that the young teenage male elephants were attacking these rhinos in games. So they were trying to figure out, now what do we do? Because how do we stop this? And they thought, well, maybe we should kill the gang leaders, but you know what happens if you kill gang leaders, you just get another gang leader. So what they did was they went over to the reserve and they got some of those old bull elephants and they brought them back to the reserve. And in a matter of days, those bull elephants came and they surrounded those young teenage elephants and put them in their place. And I'm speaking now elephant. They basically said, this is what male elephants look like. And they harnessed their testosterone and they stopped those teenage male elephants from wreaking havoc, from killing other animals. And so the point is, if male elephants need bull elephants and masculine energy to mold them and shape them, our boys need that as well. And so one of the key ingredients to raising boys into good men, to helping them harness their testosterone for good purposes, is to surround them with good masculine energy, with men who will teach them how to be men. One of the things we know about boys is where girls sort of have that monthly reminder when they move into puberty that they're becoming women and their bodies begin to change and their emotions begin to change. They recognize they're moving into to womanhood. Boys' bodies change, but they don't have that thing happening inside that says, I'm becoming a man now. Boys need to be trained to be men. So let's talk first about the importance of dads. And we know from all the research that boys need their dads. So Warren Farrell is a man here in the United States who's written this big book called The Boy Crisis. It's about 300 some pages. It's really good. And he's got a whole 2-3 chapters on the importance of dads. And by the way, Chuka will send you a little ebook I've written about dads after we're done. But here's what he says. You can read it there. I'll read it for you. Without dads as role models, boys' testosterone is not well challenged. The boy experiences a sense of purposelessness, a lack of boundary enforcement, rudderlessness, and often withdraws into video games and video porn. At worst, when boys' testosterone is not well channeled by an involved dad, boys become among the world's most destructive forces. When boys' testosterone is well challenged by an involved dad, boys become among the world's most constructive forces. So his argument is, and we know this, boys need dads, and they need good dads, involved dads, showing them all the time what it means to be a man. My friend Dr. Michael Gurian, you saw his picture earlier when we were talking about testosterone, talks about bi-strategic parenting. That boys need moms and dads because moms and dads tend to parent differently, and boys need both. So very quickly, some things about dads that are unique. Where moms tend to be more verbal in the way that they talk to their sons, dads tend to be more physical or kinesthetic in their style. So dads like to roughhouse with boys or play physical, games with them. Dads will use physical contact to nurture relationship with their sons. And so this is important for boys as they're growing to nurture all the different things in their brains and in their bodies to help them become good men. Where moms tend to be more protective and risk averse, dads tend to foster risk and challenge. Dads will oftentimes let their boys do things that moms would be horrified if they knew was happening. And so it's important for moms to understand that boys need that sense of safety, but boys also need to be able to push out boundaries and take some risks within, context of love and care, because that's what testosterone does, and that's going to shape them into good men. Where moms tend to be more protective, or I already said that, sorry. Let me move on to my next page. Dads also temper their tenderness with toughness and their toughness with tenderness. So this is a really interesting difference in parenting style. If a child falls and hurts himself, the first thing mom wants to do is run over and see if he's okay. Son, are you all right? Are you okay? Maybe you better take a breath. What dad will tend to do is look at his son, and if his son isn't dying, will probably say to him, son, get up, shake it off, let's go. And the boy needs both. Because your son, the boy, is going to grow up into a world where he's going to have to stand up and shake it off because nobody's going to be there to say, are you okay? But at the same time, he needs that love from mom, that are you okay, to create in him that compassionate heart. The boy needs both. All right. Another thing that our boys need is another thing our boys need is masculine, a sacred purpose. All right. And my friend Michael Gurlian likes to talk about how boys need a moral compass for their lives. They need a vision that sees beyond themselves to other people. And Michael has created a mnemonic for what a heroic boy is. A boy is honorable. He does the right thing. He's enterprising in that he uses his abilities in the service of others. He's responsible in that he owns his actions. He's original in that he knows who he is. He's comfortable in his own skin. He's intimate in that he does to others as he would have them do to him. And he's creative in that he learns how to use his gifts to make a better world. And Michael has created this to say, these are some things that we can teach our boys. And then he and I have created some rites of passage around that to give some intentionality to that. And so boys need a sacred purpose. They need to know they're created in the image of God. They need to know that they are here not for themselves, but to use their God-given gifts to build a better world. And boys need a reminder of that over and over again as they move throughout their lives. And so they need men, they need women calling out their gifts. Man, you're really good at this. You're really good at that. I just saw you right now offer some compassion to that girl over there. That was really good. So we need to catch boys doing things that are good, and we need to challenge them when they're not acting like good men. And then one final thing, and then we'll move to your questions. Boys need a blessing. Every boy needs to hear from dad or from a significant man in his life, and for women too, but it's really important to hear it from a man. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Dad's affirmation is crucial, or an important man's affirmation is crucial to carry that boy through his life. No matter what's going on, to always know my dad's proud of me, or my grandpa's proud of me, my coach is proud of me, they believe in me, I'm going to keep going. We have an example of that in the Bible with Jesus. Before he started his mission, God spoke to him and said, you are my beloved son, I'm fully pleased with you, I'm proud of you. And when Jesus went into the wilderness, that identity as God's son was tested 3 times over the course of 40 days. And I think it was those words of God in Jesus' mind and heart, I'm proud of you, I believe in you, you are my son, that kept Jesus going. The affirmation is that important. I want to close with one final story, and then we'll take some questions. We've kind of flown through this stuff quickly, but I want to leave you with a little story about my dad. My dad's dad was an alcoholic, and my dad's dad was not a very good man. My dad's dad, my grandpa, would leave his family continually and eventually left my dad's family. So it was my grandma having to raise 4 kids. And she had to do it on herself. And this was during the Depression. And my dad was the second born. And so he had to sort of be the man in the house. And he never got the blessing from his dad. And in fact, one time his father tried to come back into their lives, and my dad said, "You stay away." And they actually got into a fist fight. My dad had to fight him and force him to leave. Now, as I got older and started understanding the father wound and how important it is to have a dad's affirmation, I began to see some things in my dad where it was obvious that he had a father wound. And a few months before he died, I was leading a study for men, and we were talking about our heroes. And I happened to walk by my dad as he was sharing that his hero was his father. And I thought, what are you talking about? That man was abusive to your mother. That man left you. He's an alcoholic. He never poured love into you. What do you mean he was your hero? And what I want you to hear in my dad's response is that the little boy in my dad still needed his dad's affirmation and love. And we have a lot of boys who never hear dad's affirmation or affirmation from a powerful man, and they grow up to be men with a father wound. And that father wound drives them to constantly try to prove themselves. And sometimes they will do that by taking risks they shouldn't take, getting into behaviors they shouldn't do, all because they're trying to prove to their dad that they're worth something. And so our boys need men in their lives and women. Our boys need a sacred purpose, but our boys need to be rooted in the fact that they are created in the image of God, that God loves them, and that they are worth something and God is pleased with them. And so those are some of the things that we need to give to our boys. I'm going to pull my screen down at this point, and we're going to see what questions you might have. I see most of you are not seeable because you've turned your pictures off. If you want to turn your pictures on for me, I would appreciate it because we would love to see you, and it'll make it easier for us to answer questions that you might have. So there's 2 ways to ask a question. If you hit down at participants, and then a list will come up and you'll see your name there, and you can just hit a button that says more and you'll be able to raise your hand, or you can raise your hand to us. But of course, right now I can't see any of you. So I would love to see you if you want to bring your picture up and see what kind of questions we have. And Jeff and I are going to scour the screens over and over again. Maybe Chuka, you can help us as well if you see some people raising their hands. And so Chuka, do you have a question that you want to get us started with or a comment?
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. I'd like you to talk a little bit more to explain the concept of rites of passage.
Yes.
I know it's a special Jewish experience, but it would be nice to talk a little bit about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Chuka's spot on. A rite of passage is crucial for all boys. Again, I mentioned how girls have this monthly rite of passage to let them know they're becoming women. Boys don't have an equivalent to let them know they're becoming men. And so even though it's our Jewish friends who still basically do a rite of passage with their bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, rites of passage go back to the beginning of human civilization. And all kinds of tribes and people groups would create different kinds of rites of passage to teach boys to become men. Let me give you one example of it. I don't remember which group of people this was, but they would create this lavish, every time a boy would turn 13, they created this almost dramatic experience where the boy would be in the tent with mom and she would have her arms around him. All of the men of the village would then come to that tent. surrounded by all the women screaming, trying to protect the boy from the men. Again, this is all choreographed. And then the father or the chief would go in and grab the boy from the mother's arms to symbolically tear him from the world of the feminine to move him into the world of the masculine. And so he's taken away by all the men. The women are still screaming, no, we want him, we want him. Again, they're all acting. They know this is coming. And then the boy is taken out with the men. And he'll go through some sort of test and challenge. It might be a hunting trip, and he can't go back until he's caught something. It might be to say, all right, son, we'll see you tomorrow, and he's on his own for the rest of the night. He's just got to figure it out. He's got to make his way back to the tribe. Sometimes when I tell these stories, the moms are horrified. And you can't do that with a boy. And the men are saying, yeah, that's a great idea. I'd love to do that. So part of it is teaching this boy to be a man, to learn how to take risks, to learn how to live for himself. But he's always surrounded by the safety of the men. He may not know it, but the men are there. They're cheering him on. And once the boy has accomplished the tasks, he's brought back to the village, and the men and the women, all the children, have a lavish feast to celebrate that he has now become a man. Now he's only 13, right? He's not a man, but he's been through a process to introduce him to manhood. And so I reference that Michael and I have created some rites of passage, both for faith and secular families, some in groups, some that dads can do with their sons, using that heroic. We've also done some for girls, because rites of passage have basically been lost in our cultures. We don't really do them here at all, except for our Jewish friends. But in the United States, boys will make up their own rites of passage. And one of the things that they'll do when they go to college, for example, is they'll go on drinking binges. And, the weekend is spent trying to prove your manhood by drinking as much as you can and having sex with as many girls as you can, because that's how they define manhood, because they haven't had a man to say that's not what it is at all. And so when boys don't have a rite of passage, or when boys don't have men pouring a masculine vision into their lives, they will make up their own. And it will almost always be destructive, because they're just kids. So Chuka, that's a very, very good question. Thank you so much for that. It's so important to have a rite of passage for our boys. And in the book that Chuka will send you, I reference it. We've changed the name and so on, but I'll send Chuka the information for you if you want to look at it, right? And maybe have access to that. I do see a hand now. We are probably not going to say your names correctly. So I see Joshua. Is that correct, Joshua?
Yes, it is.
Good, thank you. Do you want to ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. I just can't see you, but that's all right. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, as a father, I am a father and I have a son. At what stage do I really need to start giving him the impression of a masculine attention?
All right. I heard you say at what age should you give, and then I missed it. At what age should you start giving him like training for manhood? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I think it starts right away, as soon as your son comes out of the womb. And that happens in the way that you care for him, the way that you spend time with him. Obviously when he's a little boy, he's not going to understand, hey, son, you got to learn how to be a man. That's not the point. The point is you're modeling for him what it looks like to be a man. The point is that you are involved in his life. As he's growing, you will find that there'll be moments when you say, man, son, what you just did there, that was amazing. Congratulations. And they're going to be teaching moments. Your son's going to make a mistake and you're going to have to pull him aside. Your son is going to have some things happening to his body when he starts turning about 11, 12, or 13. And you're going to have discussions with him about that. Your boy's going to begin to discover girls. You're going to have discussions with him about that. And then there's going to come that point sort of when he's 12, 13, 14, where you're going to want to look for as best you can something like the rite of passage, where you can just take your son on an adventure or a trip, or even just, once a week, go out and do something fun and whatever sport you like, or go for a walk and just talk about things of manhood. And I would say, you can't say this enough, and maybe get in the habit now, every night before your son or daughter goes to bed, just say, I am so proud of you. I love you. And I like to, when I'm with my grandkids, I like to bless them. I just make the sign of the cross on their forehead. And I say, the Lord bless you and keep you. And to just keep that always in front of our kids. Always let them know, I love you. I've raised a son. And my son got himself into some situations he should not have gotten himself into when he was a kid. But the one thing he always knew was that mom and dad loved him and he could come clean. And he didn't have to live in fear. I mean, he knew he had done stupid stuff, but he knew mom and dad loved him, and it was okay that he could, it would be safe for him to come clean. And he turned out okay. There is a couple chat questions. Jeff, do you want to look those up for me?
So on the chat, there's just one that has come in,
Okay.
and I won't even say the name because I'll just butcher it up. But you know who you are. Basically, she said, I am a mum. I love that, the British thing. I am a mum and can imagine the horror.
All right. So I want to read it too. And can imagine the horror. Do you want to finish that out for me? The horror of raising a son. It's actually quite thrilling. Okay, so there was a question that came to me, and it says, please explain more why there is a strong desire to be affirmed by a biological father, even when he might not be a role model, like in your dad's case. All right, so that is a really, really good question, okay? It's a primal need. It is a primal need for boys to see their dads as heroes. And I see this over and over and over again. Dads who have abandoned their sons, dads who just want nothing to do with their sons, and their sons just crave dad's love. Even though they know dad's not a good guy, they just crave dad's love. And it's just this biological primal need built into us by God, I think. This need for dad's love. Now, I want to say, though, that there are times when boys aren't going to get that, especially if dad isn't a good man or dad doesn't understand the importance of blessing. And that's why it's important for moms, if there is no dad around, or if dad isn't really a very good guy, to find another man that this boy respects. Could be grandpa, could be an uncle, could be a coach, could be a pastor, a youth director, whatever it is, teacher. And just ask that man. Just say, hey, once in a while, could you just walk up to my son, put your hand on his shoulder, look him in the eye, and say, you're a really special young man. And I want you to know I believe in you. And every boy needs to hear that from a man he admires. Needs to hear it from dad, but he might not get it. But he needs to hear it from a significant man. And if he can hear it from a significant man enough in his life, it will compensate somewhat for that father wound. But that's a really, really good question. So thank you for asking that. Oh, by the way, she was saying I can only imagine the horror. She was describing what it must be like for the moms when the boys are ripped out of the tent, and the boy is sent off to wander. So I get, okay, good. Thank you for that. Here's another question. Is it true that at age 5, a boy doesn't listen or learn basic upbringing? No, that's not true at all. There's some theory which that kids learn most of what they're going to learn from ages 0 to 5, or at least their brain is going to be set for learning in 0 to 5. That's a learning theory that hasn't really proved true. I would imagine every single one of us who's watching this seminar today would say, I've learned a whole lot more since I was 5 than I did from 0 to 5. We're constantly learning. But what it does say is how important it is to create a healthy environment for our children from 0 to 5, where our kids feel safe, where our kids are getting a good education, where kids are feeling loved by men and women, moms and dads, and a good environment is set. One of the things that we want to do, and this is a little off your question, but one of the areas where boys tend to fall behind girls is in reading. Girls, their brains are connected, and they use white matter, which is spread throughout the whole brain, and so they're using their whole brain. Boys tend to use gray matter, which is spotted. So if you've ever heard about boys compartmentalizing their thinking, that's brain science. They have these gray splotches, and so it's possible for a man to be working on his computer and a woman walk in and have an hour-long conversation with him, and he hasn't heard a word because he's in gray matter, right? So girls produce twice as many words in a day as boys do. Now that includes speaking, that includes reading, consuming words, twice as many words in a day. A boy's brain is about 1.5 to 2 years behind a girl, as I mentioned, until about junior high, high school. And so a boy's brain is about 1.5 to 2 years behind a girl in reading. Now, I don't know what it's like there where all of you are, but in the United States, we're trying to get our kids fully reading by kindergarten, by age 5. And our boys are suffering because of it. Because at age 5, a boy has a 3-year-old brain compared to a girl's 5-year-old brain. He can't read and process words the way that a girl does. And so our girls are excelling. And what happens is our boys get to kindergarten and they can't read and they feel like failures and they fall increasingly behind in reading. And pretty soon they say, reading is for girls. I don't want to read. And so we've got to figure out in our school systems how to help boys read and allow boys to read books that boys want to read. All right? Not if they want to read a comic book, let them read a comic book. If they want to read a sports page, let them read a sports page. We have all of these things in our schools here in the United States of books that aren't, they're not, you can't read them because they've got violence in them. But boys don't read violence for violence. Boys read violent books for character development. Because the boys are reading books not through the filter of, oh, I'm going to go out and be violent. They're reading books about what it means to be a good guy or a bad guy. And so boys tend to live in this good versus bad world. And they're constantly consuming things. How do I be a good man? What does it look like to be a good man? Who's the bad guy? How do I fight the bad guy? They're not reading books and becoming more violent. There's no research on that. They're not playing violent video games and becoming more violent. There's no research on that. But our boys shouldn't be playing as many video games as they are. They need to read more or get outside more. But our boys are behind in terms of reading. And so that 0 to 5 is really important to understand how a boy's brain develops so that they can learn at their own pace. And very, very important. What would you say are the 3 greatest needs of a male child as he grows from childhood? That's a really good one. One is, I've kind of mentioned these already, but I'm going to summarize them. He needs that blessing from both mom and dad all the time. He needs to know he's loved. He needs to always know, no matter what happens, he's rooted in love. Along with that, as a Christian man, I think he needs to know that his Creator loves him and that his Creator comes to him never out of anger, but only out of grace and transformation. And thirdly, I think that he needs some good men around him as he grows. All right, women are going to be there. In our school systems, 99% of all the elementary age school teachers are female. Most of our Sunday school teachers are female. So they're going to get male or female input. They need good masculine input. And we don't have enough of that for our boys. And I mean good masculine input, okay? How reasonable is it for a boy to be trained to fight all in a bid to build some confidence? Okay. Yeah, that's such a good question. Let me go from this way. How does a boy build confidence? Okay. And again, I've sort of touched on this. The first building block for confidence is to have it poured into him by people who matter to him. Okay. Again, mom, dad, I love you. This is what you're really good at. Here's a little difference between the way women tend to raise kids and men tend to raise kids. Women tend to raise kids with self-esteem. You're great. You're awesome. Whatever you do is wonderful. All right. Now, I'm overstating the case, right? But you're fantastic. We call them participation awards over here in the United States of America. If you just gave your best effort, you get a medal. All right. It's not about winning or losing. Just give your best effort. And our kids need that. But what men tend to do is teach self-respect. And what self-respect says is, you can't be anything you want to be. I know you want to be a famous pop singer, but you can't sing. You can't carry a tune. So you're never going to be a famous pop singer. Look, you're never going to be a famous author because you're not as good with words. You're really good at building stuff with your hands. You can't be everything. You can't be anything. But this is who you can be because these are the gifts that you have. And there's a whole wide range of things you can be with those gifts. That's what a man brings. That brings confidence to a boy, to have people call out what his gifts are. And then, you know, just this whole thing of when catching a boy doing something that's not appropriate, call him on it, challenge him on it. When he's doing something that's right, build him up for it. And then I think you do need to, at some point, sort of teach some skills. Michael Gurian loves to recommend that boys participate in some sort of karate or jujitsu or something where they're learning how to use their bodies defensively, and yet they're learning confidence and skills. Sports can be a great way to do some of that. So all of those things sort of help build confidence in a boy. In terms of fighting it out, you know, we obviously we don't want to encourage boys to fight it out. But there are always defining moments in a man's life where it may not be a physical fight, but he's got to fight for his job. He's got to fight for his family. He's got to fight for his faith. He's got to fight for his country. And I think that's what you're getting at, to teach boys, to give them the confidence to do that and to know when to fight the battles and when to withdraw. And all of that just is stuff that you got to train them to do. Because, you know, I'm 62. I still can't tell you the formula for that. You just got to give your boys some instinct. And if you raise good men, they're going to, for the most part, make good, wise decisions. Boy, some great questions here. How can older boys or even young men get some help if they feel they have not been affirmed while growing up and are acting out? Such a good question. What I would say is, first of all, if you could partner them with a man they really respect, and it could be dad, grandpa, and just that man takes them out and takes them for a walk or takes them out for their favorite meal and just starts talking, having a relationship. But oftentimes boys do need to go to counseling, whatever form that might take, with a pastor, a youth leader, or something. But very quickly, here's the problem with counseling. The whole counseling profession is built on a female brain. It's based on sitting quietly and talking and getting your emotions out. And that's not how boys get emotions out. Boys get their emotions out by moving. So my friend Michael Gurian, who is a behavioral therapist, what he'll do with men, he'll ask girls or women if they want to do this as well, but most say no. But when he asks a guy, do you want to go out for a walk for 15 minutes? Yeah, let's do that. And then the boy or the man starts to open up. Okay. And what Michael will do when he's having a discussion with boys is he'll have a ball, a squish ball, and he'll ask the question and then he'll throw the ball to the boy so the boy can answer and squish at the same time. So at least he's got something activating his brain. So when you're looking for someone to counsel or mentor your boy, you need to have someone who understands that boys need to move and that boys don't talk about their feelings. They will eventually, but they have to be moving in order to do that. So you're going to really want to find somebody who understands how boys work. But when boys start acting out, when boys start getting themselves into trouble, sometimes we need the intervention of an outsider to help. And I don't know what the systems are in where you all are from, but here we have a pretty good healthcare system in terms of emotional health. We just don't have a very good care for boys, because again, so much of the profession is built on, well, sit down, just tell me how you're feeling. And a lot of women can do that. But a lot of boys can't. Right now, Chuka, I've got a number of questions yet, but it's 11:01. So I'm willing to stay online and answer questions as long as people do. But do you want to bring this to a formal close, or you want to just keep going for a while?
Well, I think since the questions are there, I think let's take the questions and then we can, maybe let's extend for maybe another 20
Okay.
20 minutes.
All right, I'll do that. And look, if you have to go, feel free to just drop off. And we are recording this. I'm going to send a copy of this to Chuka there, or we'll try to post it on Facebook or YouTube. We'll do something so that you can have access to it. These are such good questions. I really appreciate them. And it means you're really engaged with this topic. And what this says to me is you've been watching boys. And you've got a sense that something's going on, right? So this is really, really good. Okay. Let's see. What can I do to build my son's interest in reading? He prefers to play games throughout the day. He's 12 years old. Very normal. Very normal. I would say, first of all, find a book that your son would like to read. And they not all boys, but generally boys are going to want to read books that have to do with superheroes or Harry Potter type books, Lord of the Ring type books, fantasy novels where the boy is out on a quest to save the world. Not all boys, but a lot of boys will like those kinds of books. Find a book he wants to read. And now, I am not a counselor or a therapist. I just have friends who are. So probably what I say now will not be kosher for them. But bribe your son and say, look, if you spend 30 minutes reading, I'll give you 30 minutes of video games. So for every 30 minutes you read, you get 30 minutes to play a video game. Now look, there's all kinds of brain research about screen time for our boys and girls, and they're on the screens far too much, and it's not good for them. So we want to wean the boy away. So another thing you might do is say, you read for 30 minutes, and you go out and you exercise for 30 minutes. I'll give you 30 minutes of screen time. Now, we don't expect him to read 30 minutes and then every 30 minutes go out for 30 minutes. But the boy needs to get exercise. Go play football. Go play soccer, ping pong, whatever it is. Go for a run. Go for a walk. But we need to get our boys moving. We need to get our boys reading. So find a book he wants to read. And if he won't read it by himself, then sit down and read it with him. And maybe for a while you have to read, or take turns. And also, if dad's in the frame, if dad's around, then dad, even if dad doesn't like to read, then dad's got to sit down with a book and pretend to read. Dad's got to model reading, because our boys have to see that reading is masculine. And if our boys want to get ahead in the world, no matter what they're going to do, they got to be able to read. And I think once boys discover just how great reading is, they're going to be hooked. But it's finding the right book for them. And maybe it's a comic book to start. Spider-Man, whatever. So great question. This one I love. How do you develop assertiveness and empathy in boys? I'll just go back again and say a lot of this is taught and caught. So boys need to see men being assertive and women being assertive in good ways. And they also need to see men and women being empathetic. But there is something about this whole catching them in the act, or explaining when they see something. So let's say you're watching a TV show and a character acts empathetically. Just pause the show for a moment and say, all right, now tell me what you just saw. How were they acting? What were they behaving? Why did they act that way? Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever seen somebody hurting and you just felt like crying for them, or you wanted to help them? And use some teaching moments from TV. Talk about experiences in your life when you showed empathy or somebody showed empathy to you. And again, if you find them doing something empathetic to their brother or sister, let them know, pat them on the back, say, hey, that was great. And when they're being assertive in a good way, when they're standing up for themselves, saying, hey, no, I'm not doing that because I'll give you an example. I'm the firstborn of 5 kids. And I don't know if you've had a number of kids, you know, the firstborn gets all the rules. And by the time you get to the 5th, you've just given up, right? You've had it. You can't keep rules anymore, but you still keep the rules for the firstborn. So here I am. I'm 10 years older than my youngest sister, and my curfew is the same time as hers. Well, that's not fair. So I had to stand up for myself, and I managed to get myself an extra 10 minutes. So, you know, those are the things that we want. We want our sons to advocate for themselves in school. If our son got a grade in school and he doesn't feel like it was fair, hey, talk it through with him and say, all right, practice. I'm your teacher. Now you come to me and you tell me why you need a better grade. And that helps teach some assertiveness, not anger, but assertiveness. How do single mothers manage? It's always the question. And we have more single moms than we have single dads, but you could ask the same about single dads. But single moms, the issue, of course, is being a mom to a son. You have no experience being a man, right? You have no experience what it is to be a masculine person. And so you're just going to do what you do. You do what your body tells you to do. You do what your biology tells you to do. You do what your heart tells you to do. You be a mom. And then look for some guys who maybe can invest in your son, or if not invest in your son, at least find a trusted man or two where you can just say, look, here's what's going on with my son. Can you help me with this? I don't understand why he's acting this way. I don't get it. I understand boys do this. I don't get it. Can you help me with that? And so if you can just be mom. I know sometimes moms feel like they have to be both mom and dad. That's not possible, really, is it? Just be mom. Use your gifts, your talents for raising your son. Get some men into his life, or at least into your life. Might be your father, could be a brother, somebody you really trust who can help you process what it is to work with a boy. And then learn all you can about boys. Just try to get into the mind of a boy. And again, Chuka's going to send my book. My friend Michael Gurian has written several really good books that you can find. And before we go, I'm going to tell you about a seminar coming up, and we'll send information to you on that. Is it true that boys tend to have a stronger connection with their moms while girls connect better with their dads? If yes, why is this so? I'm not sure there's actually any scientific verification for either of that. My experience in my families have been that the moms and daughters, I have a very good relationship with my daughter, but in part because we're wired the same way, and she's a firstborn, I'm a firstborn. We're in ministry together. A lot of our thinking is the same. We like to challenge each other. She's the one who got me to go to Rwanda 4 times. But she and her mom have a different kind of connection. Whenever she calls her mom first, not me. My mom and her mom were inseparable. So that's what I've seen in my family, and I've seen good relationships with dads. But I do think that there are times when moms and daughters can sort of butt heads, and dads and sons can butt heads. And so that's sort of my non-answer to your question. I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason to it. It can be personality. It could just be the way that you relate to each other. But I'm not sure one way or the other. My experience has been moms and daughters tend to have something as they get older. Maybe not when they're younger, but as they get older. But I'll say for my wife, she and her mom did not have that kind of relationship. They got along okay. But I think my mom or my wife got along better with her dad. So I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason to all of that. My son is the last of 4 children, and the older ones are girls. It's a lot of estrogen in his family. There's a lot of frustration with him because they measure him by girls' standards. Yes, exactly. How can I get them to see the point about the difference between male and female development and be more understanding? Such a good question. And right now, we're, at least here in the United States of America and other parts of the world, the westernized world and other spots too, I'm guessing from what I hear, same in some of our African countries, There's a lot of emphasis right now, as there should be, on women and girls and making sure they're treated equally and that they're safe. But in the United States, we've had so much emphasis on protecting our daughters and women that we've lost the storyline for our boys. And almost to the point where in some circles, men and boys have become the bad guys, period. And so we don't have a lot of people talking about how great men are. And when you got 4 girls, 4 sisters, and 1 son, that poor guy. So I think, you know, if you go online and do some research on books about why boys are the way they are, why girls are the way they are, that might even be helpful for your girls to read, I would encourage you to do that. You're going to get a copy of my book from Chuka, and I go into some of this. That might be helpful as a way to teach them. And, you know, and there, it sounds like you need to advocate for your son. And I encourage you to do that. Say, look, he's not a girl. He's a boy. And and because he's a boy, he's created in the image of God. He is just as a legitimate human being as you are, and his way of living life is just as valid as your way of living life. And we need him. We need more masculine energy. We need more good masculine energy in our world. Let's see. How can you reconcile the fact that most violent acts by young men were preceded by either watching video games or some online activities, if there's no connection? There may be anecdotal information that says a boy watched a violent video game and went out and did something, but there's no scientific research to say that there's a causal effect for that. More often than not, boys who do acts of violence are boys that have mental health issues in their lives. And what we sometimes have a hard time doing is separating boy's action from the mental health of that boy. And so when we see boys acting violently, it's not always because they've got mental health issues. But when we see boys acting violently, it's oftentimes because they've been abused, they've been bullied, they are growing up in a home without a strong masculine energy to say, this is what good masculinity looks like. So it's not the video games that's causing the violence. It's all the other things around them. The video game in that boy's life may feed into the violence, but that violence is already there because of mental illness or because he's abused or because he's been bullied. And so it's not, there's not a one-to-one relationship there. Do I think boys should watch less violent video games? Yes, absolutely. It's just not good to keep putting that stuff in their brains. But at the same time, to remember that where women generally, and some of us men, look at those video games and we see violence, what the boys see is a storyline of good versus evil. And so it's not the violence so much as the storyline of good versus evil. And that's kind of hard for some of us to get our brains around. You know, I wasn't raised in that world of video violence. So I don't quite, like my son, you know, he's a video game guy. He gets it. I don't get it the way that he does. So it's a really good question. I think the deeper issue is violence in young men. And these young boys who are being bullied, these young men who don't have good men in their lives, these young men who maybe have mental challenges in their life and they're not being attended to the way we would for girls, because boys tend not to talk about it the same. When a boy is depressed or angry, he holds it in until he explodes. When a girl is depressed or angry, she tends to talk it out, and you see the symptoms in her behavior. A boy, the symptoms are he shuts down, he clams up, he crawls in himself. And my son struggled with severe clinical depression for many, many years. And even though I know the signs, I didn't see them for 2 or 3 years. And we went through, and he went through, we all went through together 3 to 4 years of hell of trying to get his life balanced out again. And finally, you know, he's good now, but it was tough, and we missed the signs. My daughter, we could tell she was talking it out. My son was just clammed up, and we just thought, well, he's being a boy. He was just not, but it was deeper than that, and we just didn't pay attention. How have you helped young boys who have a problem with pornography? Oh boy, yeah. And how would you deal with that without causing shame or turning them off? Is there any way to follow up after such intervention? I can't speak to this well. I've not had a lot of contact with this myself in terms of boys who've been caught with pornography. I do know some of the things that I've read. One of the things that my friend Dr. Green says, first of all, that you want to say to boys is, hey, this is normal. Boys are wired visually. And one of the ways that you are created sexually is to see beauty and to respond to that beauty. And I know that's why you see these women. So it's normal, but I want you to know that it's not really healthy for you. And that's not good because it's not real. And I want you to experience real relationships. All of that's fake. And that's not the kind of man you want to be. That's not the kind of boy you want to be. There's no shame in it. Look, for the rest of your life, son, there's going to be a woman who walks by and you're going to have a sexual thought. That's the way your brain works, and that's not wrong. It's if you act on it, that's the problem. But there's nothing wrong with those thoughts as long as they don't control you. And he's going to maybe need a man to have a conversation with him about this at some point. But if you find that he has become enmeshed in it, addicted to it, you're probably going to need some professional people to come in, counselor, somebody, and help you with a strategy to help him. And he can be helped, right? The thing about pornography is we have this thing in our brain, it's the pleasure center. And every time a boy sees pornography, it stimulates the pleasure center, it releases dopamine, it feels good. And so then he needs to see more. And then he needs to see more. And that's when it becomes a problem. Maybe the soft porn that he saw before, which gave him a dopamine rush, doesn't do it anymore. And so now he moves into more explicit stuff. So as long as your son is living under your roof and you're paying his bills, you have every right to know what websites he's on and who he's texting to. And if he doesn't like those rules, then fine. He doesn't have to have a phone or a computer. And that's not about being mean. That's about being a parent. And so you need to know what sites your son is on. You need to know what his texts are doing. And you have the right to do that because you're his parent and you're paying the bills. And what that allows you to do is have really good conversations. He may say, you don't trust me, and say, well, you know what? It's not that I don't trust you. I want you to earn my trust. And this is how we're going to do it. So I'm going to let you have the phone for an hour a day. And then I'm going to check your browser history. I'm going to check your texts. I'm going to let you be on the computer for an hour today. I'm going to check everything. And then if you prove over the course of a month that you're trustworthy, then we'll lighten the rules a little bit. But every once in a while, I'm going to come back and check, not because I don't trust you, but because I know how you're wired. You're a boy. This is what's going to happen. And I want to make sure you're safe. Let's see. Let's see. Do I have? All right. So I think that I've got all the questions. So let me just make a comment about the Helping Boys Thrive Summit. And again, I think, Chuka, you have everybody. Do you have everybody's email address? I'm guessing you do. I'm guessing that if anybody was on this internet thing today, they got it because you sent them something, right? Okay. So my friend Michael Gurian has written several best-selling books, and he uses brain science research for all of his discussions. And so when he's talking about boys and girls, he's not just throwing out ideologies. He's using science to say, this is how boys learn, this is how girls learn, this is where they're similar, this is where they're different. And over the course of 30 years, he has not only advocated for boys and girls, but he has helped school districts and school systems change the way they educate to help boys do better and girls do better. but he really has a passion for boys because they are so underserved in our country and in other parts of the world. So he and I, along with 2 other speakers, are going to be doing a 1-day online telesummit called Helping Boys Thrive on October 1st. And if you can't join us that day or can't do the whole day, we're going to have all of those four sessions up online for 7 days after that event, so you can catch it when you want to. Chuka's going to send you an email with the information. And if you want to be a part of that Helping Boys Thrive Summit, October 1st, we will waive the tuition. We'll let you go free. Okay? So Chuka and I will work that out, and then we'll find a way to get your name so that we can put you on the registration list if you'd like to join us for that. Okay? Let's see here. So that's October 1st. Chuka, I've got one more question, all right? One more question just came. When a young man seems to really not have drive for any purpose, what would be the strategy to start a conversation to give some direction? I think you would just start and move, go for a walk, go play basketball, do something, and maybe tell your own story. You know, this is how I found my purpose in life. This is how I realized what I wanted to be. And then just talk a little bit. You know, what are some things that you like to do? What are some things that you're interested in? What would you, if you could be anything you wanted to be right now when you grow up, what would that be? And just start teasing out and say, you know what? I've noticed that you have an interest in art. So how about we find a place and we take 4 art lessons and we do it together if you want. And we'll learn to draw. Or you like to play trumpet? Let's rent a trumpet and let's take some lessons. Let's see what happens. You want to play basketball? Let's join a team. And just start talking about things that he wants to do, would like to do, and then help him do that. And I think it's really important when he makes a commitment, he has to follow through. So if you sign up for an art class for 5 sessions and he gets to the second one and says, I don't want to do this anymore, say tough. Part of learning to be a good man is you're going to keep your commitment. We're going to do all 5. And that's why I recommend kind of keeping them short for a while to build up this capacity for commitment. So engage in that way. And I think that you can begin to draw out. If he doesn't have a lot of drive, I would also look at diet. Is he eating a lot of sugar? Is he watching a lot of video games? Is he just sitting around not moving? And you'll find that with boys, they need to eat healthy, they need to move, and they need to get off the screen. And so you might want to look at that in a boy. And again, it might be one of those things, if he's really on the screen, you say, okay, I'll tell you what, you take an art class. For every one art class you take, you get 30 minutes on screen. So one of the things boys do is they negotiate contracts, right? Men negotiate. So that's what you're doing. You're negotiating. All right. I'll give you 4 of these. You give me 1 of those, right? That's boy language. Okay. As I said to my friend Chuka there, I've been to Rwanda 4 times, and it was a lot easier to get to Nigeria today. And the flight was a lot more pleasant.
All right, Tim, thank you so much for your time and making yourself available. I mean, you know, we've come this journey together. Many of you won't believe that I'm seeing Tim live for the first time today.
Yeah, first time we met.
Yeah, how God, you know, organized this entire thing. I'm passionate about boys and, you know, and girls too, and, you know, seeing them thrive. As far as I'm concerned, I believe that, you know, when boys are converted to real men, society is better up for it. Because boys are farmed, you know, fathers are farmed, both the male and the female children. If you have brought up a girl well, she'll become a very good wife. And if you brought up a boy well, he becomes a good husband. Yep. I mean, substantial part of the problems we have as a country can be all sorted out if boys are properly brought up. I mean, you find people who are in our government, Senate, and all that, they still behave like boys because they didn't go through that, that passage. So you find a man who has 20 cars, 30 cars in his house. He still thinks those things are toys.
Yes.
So I think that it's critical.
Chuka, you turned off.
These conversations more, and I say thank you very much, for the wonderful session. We look forward to having more. I'm going to send a lot of your details, the books and all that to everybody who has participated, and then work out how people can also get onto the boys, helping boys thrive. That program is incredible. It will change. I mean, because the truth really is, like he said, we really don't know how boys' brains work. So
right.
Girls have an advantage over boys in learning, So, but throughout this seminar, you're going to have you learn a lot on how to balance all that, And I thank you all for joining and making this seminar a success. I will ask, should I call?
Oh, we lost you again.
I'll ask, should I call you Reverend or Pastor Kingsley to say a short closing prayer?
You see, my name there is Brother Kingsley.
Brother Kingsley.
I'll take it. Okay, Tim, thanks very much. It's quite informative and quite inspiring. I appreciate that. I would like to be part of that program in October 1, so I'll be expecting the information. Okay, you want me to pray, isn't it?
Sure.
Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you for your faithfulness. You've been such a great God. And how much interest you have for your children. It is your desire that we raise men and women that reflect your image and glorify you in life. So we just want to pray that this will continue to be an ongoing process and, teaching for every one of us to begin to be impactful in our environment in the name of Jesus. Thank you, Lord, for Tim. Thank you for using him. I pray that God, that you keep on expanding his ministry, expanding his knowledge, and anointing him so that his word will not just be information, but his word will be impactful. We give the praise for the rest of the day. For in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much,
everyone,
Tim.
for coming. Tunde, I saw you there. Fumi, thanks for your questions.
Thank you, Pastor Chuka. God bless you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to getting the recording so we can also share with parents that didn't know about this.
Good, excellent.
Have lots of friends that have male kids. This would be a real blessing to them.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the push. Thank everybody. So, Tim,
It's not
Thank you all.
It's not the end of the bridge. Is that the end of the bridge?
Thank you, Chuka. I'll send you an email, okay?
I do the email and then at least I have your phone number. You can now talk more. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah.
I really appreciate you asking me. Thank you. Appreciate it. You guys have a good week.
Thank you. Take care.